But I'm your host, Sarah Greener, and I'm super excited to dive into today in a different location than when I'm normally talking to you. We have started our location freedom journey. What do I mean by that? About 7 years ago, one of the things that Jonny and I decided that we wanted from our business wasn't just the financial security and ultimately freedom. We also wanted the ability to do it from anywhere. We wanted to remove ourselves from those societal frameworks that exist in terms of schooling, in terms of work, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. We wanted to change things up a bit. If you've been listening along, you will know that end of last year, after doing the retreat with all of my clients, we dove into a renovation with our house, getting it ready to Airbnb it. That went live in January earlier this year, and now we are out of not just our house, but also out of the country. We spent a few days in Singapore and are now settling in here in Thailand. And part of that journey is that we are going to homeschool, unschool, world school, Scarlett. We're not going to be confined by the curriculum or school hours or school holidays. We are going to allow where we are at, the environment, the food, the history, the language, the ecosystems that we're going to spend time in to help frame the education that she's going to get. From a business point of view, our businesses are going to run as they were running before. All we've done is moved where we're based. I'm still doing what I do. I'm going to be showing up here for the podcast. I'm going to be coaching my clients from afar. I'm going to be doing some in-person events with them when we come back to New Zealand. We're just not going to be tied to one location anymore, because being tied to one location came with some expectations that we wanted to shake off, and we're finding it hard to do in the environment that we were in. We started the plan for this, I'm going to say 7-8 years ago. Scarlett's just recently turned 12, and we were on track to leave and do this process in 2020. Obviously, a significant world event happened in early 2020. We were unable to travel. The sale of our business fell over, and we had to rebuild our business back. We were in tourism, more specifically international tourism. We lost 100% of our business when the borders closed. We lost $1 million sale of our business, and we literally had to build it back from scratch, including the team on board the boat, rebuilding up, retraining up a skipper. We finally got to the position where that was all sorted for us in December last year, hence the trip back to the UK to hang out with Jonny's family, and it worked really well. Now we're able to be here. What does that mean from Jonny's point of view? With running the boat, the cruises are still going to operate, it's still going to happen. We've got an onboard team that runs the cruises. We've got an offshore team, a person that are running all the on-the-shore logistics, taking bookings, answering phone calls most of the time. And then Jonny's doing them outside of their working hours. Plus he's doing sales, development, and he'll be popping back to New Zealand in September to do the maintenance, which is cool. In terms of everything else, we're somewhere where it's warm and tropical, which is nice. We've been figuring out our routines because there's no constraints on our lives anymore. There's no expectation that our child will go to school at a certain time. The only thing that our life is driven by is the business that I have built, because there are certain times where I need to show up for my clients, and I want to keep doing that. Freaking love what I do. We have constructed our new daily and weekly rituals around that, and it's been super fun. There's also been some challenges. Packing up, moving your whole life, getting rid of all your stuff has been challenging for Scarlett, because I don't know about you, if you've got kids, they get pretty attached to certain things. Coming down to, hey, what can you fit in a suitcase? What can you carry? And that's all that's going to come with you now was a big shift for her. She had to leave behind all her friends, her teachers, her family, like everyone that she's really connected to. Big shifts for her. We've had some days, we've had some quite big emotions. In the process of leaving, of course, life always throws out some challenges where you go to the next level and change the way that you're doing things. And my gran, who was 96, decided that she got a little bit more unwell, and she decided that she was going to go into end of life, and actually passed away on the Sunday before we left on the Tuesday. There was all of those emotions going on as well for her and for me and for Jonny that we've navigated leaving people behind. And of course, because Gran was 96 and had been saying she was tired and ready to go for a long time, it was both a relief and also sad, because Scarlett particularly and Gran have had a very cool relationship over the last few years, because we've lived very closely and they have had a super cool relationship, doing all sorts of cool stuff together. Gran's taught her to knit and play solitaire, and I think they've watched every David Attenborough show that there is to watch together. There's been some really big, significant life changes for us. What are some of the things that we've learned along the way? I guess the reminder, the learning maybe that we haven't learned yet, is that when you significantly change things, is that there's always going to be reasons that you shouldn't go. Certainly in those last couple of weeks before we left, the question as to whether we should delay our flights and go later because of everything that was going on with Gran definitely came up a number of times. Over the years, Gran has been very adamant that we were not to change our travel plans for her, and we didn't. It certainly was one of those things that was like, oh God, this was not how we envisaged our last 4 days. I did an event with my clients on the Thursday, Friday beforehand. We spent the day sitting with Gran on Saturday. She passed early on the Sunday. Of course, those last few days were there supporting my mum to lay Gran to rest on the Tuesday just before we flew out, which was beautiful to be there as someone leaves this life and goes to whatever is next, and hard. I guess the first learning out of all of this shifting around was that when you go to the next level, when you change things significantly, there's always going to be obstacles that pop up in your path, just timing. Other humans have life going on, and they are sometimes going to be people that are important to you. We have to remember that regardless of where you are in life, when you go to that next level, there will always be things that you have to navigate to get there. It always surprises me how much comes up when you're making those changes. And it's there to remind you that this was the life you decided you wanted, this was the business that you decided, and this is how you're going to get to the next level. The second thing that I've really been reminded of is that my brain is reliant on my exercise. When we were moving and going through all this transition, I think we ended up having 7 to 10 days of me not being able to move my body. And my mental well-being is very, very tightly linked to my ability to work out and to exercise, and didn't get to do a lot of that with lots of stuff going on. There are all sorts of emotions that go on with saying goodbye to everyone, moving country, picking up all your stuff, leaving your house with nothing in it. There was much going on, and trying to regulate that, look after my mental well-being, support my daughter, support my husband, was much, much harder because I wasn't looking after myself and I wasn't getting to the gym and doing that exercise. Cortisol, when you get high levels of cortisol in your body, the only way to release them is through sweat or through tears. I clearly didn't do enough crying over that period, and I definitely didn't do enough sweating. Getting back into a ritual, finding a local gym that works for us, getting back there to be working out has been good for me, good for Scarlett and Jonny too. But that's a really big learning, is I just can't skip it. It doesn't matter where I am in the world. 3 to 5 times a week, I need to be going and getting my sweat on, not for my body, although clearly I want to be healthy and strong, but mostly for my brain. If you're anything like me, you might want to check in. Have you been for a workout today? Because that's definitely been a huge lesson for us. And I guess the last thing was environment's really important. We are set up in a super cool location because a friend manages houses over here. He's organised a great place for us. We made sure we had a spare room. We've got exactly what we had at home. The third bedroom is now my office. We got here though, no desk, no setup. It was on the edge of a desk of drawers sitting on the corner awkwardly with my computer twisted around and kind of everything, bit awkward, bit uncomfortable. And it reminded me how important our environment is. Now I'm all set up, got myself a desk, got everything done, and my productivity is much, much higher when my environment is correct. I'm able to reset it at the end of each night. It's a room that I can close a door on, and it's not encroaching on our family life. It's not encroaching on our married life. Really important for me to have a working space, a working environment that's separate from the rest of our life, so it doesn't start to creep into every other part. And also to have a space that's easy to sit in and it feels good and it's got good light, because all of those things, I'm pretty sure I've covered this in a podcast before, like how your environment is, how it feels, is really important to how much you can get done. Making sure that you recognize when you're going to go to the next level, there's going to be stuff that comes up, life stuff, business stuff, team stuff, client stuff. Like, if you're going to go to the next level, there will always be the universe, God, whatever you believe in, throwing you some challenges just to make sure that this is what you really want. And it's not to stop you, it's not to redirect you, it's just to check in and make sure this is what you want, and your job is to be in control of yourself and work your way through it. So for me, oh my goodness, brain-body connection, I've got to be working out, I've got to be releasing that cortisol through some sweat so that I can function at the best of my abilities all the time. And then the last one is my environment, making sure I'm ticking all those boxes with light, with seating, with the nature coming in, making sure that's all set up with me. And again, I've covered that in another podcast. If that is something you're interested in, your environment is important. That's the news from us right now. Hi from Thailand. Super excited to be here. Let's dive in to today. This feels a little bit like a gear change because I want to talk about your numbers. And I think it's just that time of the year, like we're getting to halfway through the year where year-end accounts are getting done. For those of you in New Zealand and Australia, it's the middle of winter. It sometimes feels a bit doomy and gloomy. And maybe it's just a theme that's coming out for my clients at the moment. It's about knowing your numbers. I see all the time people feeling their numbers. Like, it feels like the sales aren't good enough. It feels like we're making money, or it feels like we're not making money. Or I think it's this that's the problem, or I think it's this the problem. And here's what I know. You can't feel numbers. You can't feel them. They are facts. They are either this or that. They do not have a feeling to them. They do not have an emotion to them. You might have some feelings about them, but you can't feel your numbers. You have to calculate them and figure them out. What are some really important things that you need to know? The things that I think upset, knock you off your game the most with business owners is that I don't understand numbers. I'm not a numbers person. I find numbers really hard. And I totally get that. That's not me. I love numbers. I love crunching them. I love playing with them. In fact, if I want to productively procrastinate, I'm off to do my numbers. Little secret, long time ago, I studied to be an accountant. Clearly wasn't my jam, but I did my business degree in accounting, worked for an accountancy firm while I did that business degree, and figured out very quickly it wasn't for me. One of the things that people struggle is they look at the profit and loss in the balance sheet and it does not make sense to them. And we need to be able, as business owners, to be able to ask great questions of the advisors that we have. In this case, around your numbers, it's likely to be a bookkeeper and accountant. And if we don't know enough or understand enough to ask great questions, sometimes things can get missed and they can slide and they can go further down the road than we would like them to. I think it's really important that you have a framework that means you understand what's going on with your numbers. And what we recommend at the Moxie World is Profit First. Highly recommend you go and get the book, read it. We have a Profit First Master Coach. Come and be our Moxie Money Coach in the community for the very reason that the framework with Profit First gives you a really visual way to see what is going on in your business, and the structure tells us what levers we need to pull or what investigations we need to do to look at the numbers. The second reason we have someone like that inside our community supporting our members is that if they don't understand something on their balance sheet or their profit loss, maybe they've had an explanation from their accountant they don't get or they're really uncomfortable with, I want to make sure that they've got someone who can slow down and explain these things to them and give them the right questions to ask their accountant. And that's not me, because I just go, oh yeah, it's this and this. And I go at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Katie, on the other hand, who comes in and does this inside our program, is freaking amazing. And she slows right down and she helps people to understand exactly what's going on and gives them exactly what questions to ask. The first thing around your numbers is you need a framework so that you understand what's going on and that you don't have to go and get your information secondhand from someone else. We recommend the Profit First system, and we always make sure that we have someone who is going to help us ask the questions, teach us about this stuff. Ideally, that should be your accountant or your bookkeeper. My experience is that not all of them are great at explaining what's going on inside your profit and loss and balance sheet, because inherently they're a bit like me. They understand numbers really well and they don't understand what it is to not understand them. Find yourself someone who you're not afraid to ask the questions of. There is no such thing as a stupid question, and you absolutely need to understand your numbers, the data of the numbers, not the feeling of the numbers. The second thing is you need to know what every unit that you're selling, whether it be a product or a service, is costing you to make. You have to understand your costings. When your business isn't making as much profit as you would like, there is a number of places we can look. The first thing is in the direct costs. What if I'm selling a widget for $100, how much does that one widget cost me to make? The components that make it up directly for each unit. We need to understand that. In some businesses, there's portion control or wastage that we need to be thinking about. Are we making sure that what we said it was going to cost us is what it's actually costing us, that we're not throwing away a whole lot of scrap product, we're not wasting things because they're going past use by dates or they're getting broken. We need to be really clear about those. And that is going to drive into what is our pricing. If our pricing is not correct because we don't know what our costings are, including the time that you spend to make each unit, and I'm looking at you, if you're a service business owner, it amazes me how often as service business owners we forget to go, oh yeah, my time has a value, and put it in there. Make sure you know what each service you provide, what each product you provide costs you to make, including GST, VAT, whatever your taxes, really common one to forget the 15% in New Zealand, whatever it is everywhere else, to add that onto your costings before you price it for your customers, for your clients, for your guests. And then the last bit that impacts our profitability is what are all the indirect costs? Or, another language, what are all the fixed costs? What are the costs that you incur in your business, even if you make nothing, even if you sell not one thing? If you have rent, that's a cost. If you have power, that's a cost. If you have internet subscriptions that you just get charged regardless of whether you sell nothing or 1,000 things, that's an indirect fixed cost. And you need to know what those are, because those are also one of the levers we can pull to bring our costs down and our profitability up. We don't have to make drastic changes all at once. First one is get some advisors on your team that help you understand what's going on in your business from a numbers point of view. No more feeling your numbers. This is the dashboard that says whether you're winning or losing at the game of business. The second thing is you need to understand your costs, the direct costs that there for each unit of your product and service, and your indirect costs or your fixed costs that you have to pay regardless of whether your business is selling things or not. You should understand both of those numbers because they have a direct impact on your profitability. You also need to understand your pricing, making sure that you are charging enough. I very rarely work with a client and look at the price that they're charging and go, oh, that's perfect. That's exactly as it should be. Very rarely. For the most part, when we crunch these numbers, I'm like, we're not charging enough. And when I ask them about a price increase, some of them will say, oh, it's been 2 or 3 years. Some will say it's been 10 years since they increased their price. The second piece is understand the components of your business. How much are you charging? What does it cost for each unit that you're charging out, regardless of whether it's a product or a service? And lastly, what are your indirect, your fixed costs, because you can start to shift them. Once you understand all of those things, then that comes down to the third step when it comes to knowing your numbers is how often are you reviewing these things? Because if you can just shift everything by 1%, if you increased your pricing up 1% and you decreased your cost of your service or your costs of your product down by 1% from each supplier, and then you went through the fixed costs and you got 1% off all of them, the bottom line would improve significantly. And I think what happens when people look at their profitability, they get really overwhelmed by either telling me that I'm making a lot of money and I've got to pay a lot of tax, but I don't have that money in my bank account. Cue lesson 1, get profit first, put into your business. You understand it, and the profit will therefore be sitting in your bank. Number 2, they don't understand how to start to tweak it and adjust it if it's too low. And sometimes it feels like we have to do everything all at once. Yet if we just do this step by step, little bit by little bit, 1% at a time, you will find that things start to shift. In the tourism business, it's seasonal. So we're obviously quite busy over the peak summer periods. And then in the winter, it gets a bit quieter. And it gives us the capacity and the time to work on our business. This is the time of the year for us where we go through our profit and loss, and we go through our expenses line by line. And every week we have a different conversation with a different supplier about how can we tweak this? How can we save here? What can we do differently to bring these costs down? It's not always possible. And sometimes you'll be amazed. We do things like move telephone companies, we move power companies, we move internet companies. Because if you haven't noticed, they're really good at looking after their new customers, but they're not good at looking after their existing customers. We've found the best way to keep those costs down for us is to move providers on a regular basis. Is it slightly annoying to have to do that? Yes. I wish some of those big corporates would get their heads around the fact that it would be far easier to retain me as a customer than to have me shop around every year. But it's absolutely worth doing from a business point of view. Suppliers, shopping around, seeing who can give you the best deal on stock that you're buying in, products that you're buying in. We work in a global economy now. Is there roles that you're currently doing locally that you could be doing globally that would be just as good from a service point of view, just as good from a outcome point of view, but significantly cheaper because the cost of living in other countries is cheaper than where you're based? These are all things that you can start to think about doing to bring the profitability in your business up. And lastly, I just want to say your numbers are not something to be scared of, and they're not something to hide from. Ignoring them, putting your head in the sand and hoping that they will get better is not a strategy. The accountant is still going to come and tell you that you've got some tax to pay, that you've got all of this work to do on your business at year end, and ignoring it won't make it go away. Get yourself in a space where people will talk to you about numbers in a language that you can understand. Make sure you've got good advisors that are open to you to talking about and explaining to you how it works. I know sometimes it might be frustrating for them if you've got a lot of questions, but you are paying them to give you good advice. If they cannot explain what is going on for you and why they're doing what they're doing, either from a tax point of view or from a legality point of view, then they may not be the right people for you. You might need to think about someone else who can help you navigate this by teaching you and helping you to understand. You need to spend some time knowing your numbers, looking at crunching the numbers and putting a system in place so that you can check in on things and review things regularly. Like I said, we do it once a year. Businesses might need to do it more often because prices might move more readily. I think it's really important that you have an annual process of reviewing those numbers. And as you all know, I have one rule of business: prices go up every year because inflation exists no matter what. It doesn't have to be a big increase, but a little increase every year is really going to help with that. And it's going to stop the pushback that you get if you forget to increase. And then last but not least, do not hide from those numbers. They are valuable. They are the scoreboard. Your numbers are the scoreboard in your business. You're playing this game called business, and those numbers tell you whether you're winning or losing. It's not the only measure of success. I'm 100% behind that. I absolutely believe in the impact that you want to make. The way that you look after your team is just as important. The reality is, though, is if the numbers don't stack up, you cannot make an impact and you cannot look after your team. It's really important that you'll get your head around this piece. From here, what do I think you should go and do? If you haven't read the Profit First book, I recommend that you go and get it. And I'm totally going to bungle Mike's name, but Mike McCallowitz, I think it is how you pronounce it. Profit First. Or if you're based in New Zealand or Australia, our lovely Katie, Criswell Marshall, she wrote the book called Profit First for Tradies. Now, even if you're not a tradie, I think this is a really good book to read if you're based in New Zealand or Australia. Why? Just because there's some nuances between New Zealand and Australia and the States that are slightly different. I highly recommend you read the book, either Katie's or Mike's, and then start applying it in your business. 2, get yourself someone who you can go and ask all the questions that you feel a little bit silly asking. There is no dumb questions. Ask away. Maybe you want to come join us in our community and ask in our community. There are no dumb questions. Ask them anonymously if you're a little bit embarrassed about them. But just remember, we all started somewhere and we all didn't understand when we got started. Get yourself in a safe space where you can get your questions answered, and you can get a list of questions to go and ask your accountant or your bookkeeper that things are working well for you, because it's your business and it's got to work for you. Next action, go and get to know your numbers. I spoke at an event not long ago, and Bridget was one of the ladies that was on the panel with me, and she talked about how she romances herself into doing the numbers, which I freaking love. She buys herself her favorite coffee, and she gets herself a sneaky treat. I think hers was like a fancy cheese scone, but you do you. Like yours might be a cupcake or a big slice of chocolate. I don't mind. But she would romance herself in by making sure her office felt good. She would light herself a candle. She would have this beautiful coffee. She would have her scone there. And that's when she would sit down to go through her numbers. Figure out what your ritual's going to be, so that you can dive in there and have a look at your numbers on a regular basis. What's going on? Do you know what your price should be? And you know what you need to tweak to bring that profitability up. If nothing else that you take away from this episode, I want you to know that if numbers scare you a little bit, you're really not alone, and you can learn to figure them out in a way that works for you. Don't feel like they have to be profit and loss and balance sheet and all that accounting speak. They can be created into a format that works really well for you on your terms. And don't let anyone else make you feel less than because you need to see your numbers in a different way. Really important that you understand what your numbers are in your business, because as I said before, your numbers are the scorecard in this game we play called business. And how will we know how well we're doing if we don't understand the scoreboard? Till next time, dive in, have a little romance around your numbers like Bridget did, and I will see you on the next episode of the Moxie Movement. Till then, stay Moxie.